understanding seems to be that well, they'd like to take Mr. Walker's baby back to New York with them.
We're dealing with an extremely dangerous criminal, ma'am. You realize that, don't you?
Well, that doesn't entitle you to just come along and take your child away without giving any reasons.
You're making it very difficult, ma'am.
Well, I'm sorry about that.
Mary Steenburgen, in a tense moment from the big new movie Ragtime, one of 4 new holiday films we'll be reviewing this week on Sneak Previews. Across the aisle from me, Gene Siskel, film critic of the Chicago Tribune.
And this is Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times. Now, in addition to Ragtime, which I happen to think is one of the year's best films, Roger and I will be reviewing Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau in Buddy Buddy, a new Brazilian film called Pixote, and now Roger begins with Paul Newman's latest picture, Absence of Malice.
Well, images of newspaper reporters seem to go through good times and bad times in the movies. In All the President's Men, the reporters were the good guys, but in Absence of Malice, the reporters and their editors are the bad guys. In the film, Sally Field is an investigative reporter working on a Miami newspaper. Paul Newman plays a liquor distributor who's the son of a mobster. They both become pawns manipulated by an overambitious, unscrupulous district attorney who believes Newman is the only man who can lead him to the murderer of an important union official. In this scene, the DA and his investigators review a file film on Newman and begin to set up their conspiracy.
And here comes our boy, Michael Colin Gallagher. 43 here, 47 now. Tommy Gallagher's only kid, nephew of Santos Malderone. For those of you who are new in town, his old man, Big Tommy, handled 5 states worth of liquor, did a little loan sharking, and kept the longshoremen out of Miami for damn near 15 years. He played rough. If he'd have been alive when Joey Diaz got hit, he'd have been suspect number 1. Since he was dead, he's probably not involved. Big Tommy had a stroke in '67, brought his kid Mike down from Chicago to run the family store. Word is, little Mike's clean. I don't buy it. I want to find out. Mirzma, IRS gets his last 6 years.
6?
Working just like you were making a net worth case. I want to know every nickel he's got and how he got it. Want to know his mortgage and his car payments and his 2106s, okay? Mac, you guys crawl all over his union stuff. Bob, Bureau gets arrest. Friends, neighbors, all the way to the butcher shop. And I want to know where he was when Joey Diaz went away. I want this guy to know we're in town, okay?
That's Bob Balaban as the assistant DA. He played one in The Prince of the City, too, and in both movies he would do anything to get his man. So Balaban leaks false information about Paul Newman to Sally Field, and she swallows it hook, line, and sinker. She prints unfair stories about Newman in her newspaper. And after the stories appear, Newman confronts Field directly. He wants to know why she'd print unsubstantiated rumors. Well, she doesn't really have an answer, but there's an unexpected development. They begin to like one another, and their romantic entanglement begins to confuse the issue.
Would you tell me the truth, Michael? I just please like to know the truth.
Tell you or the whole world?
What's the difference? The truth is the truth.
No. You want to know the truth? Okay, you want to ask me as a person? I'll tell you. You ask me as a reporter, I got no comment.
That's not fair.
Not fair to who? Wait a minute. You don't write the truth. When you write what people say, but you overhear, you eavesdrop, and you don't come across truth that easy. I mean, maybe it's just what you think, what you feel.
Then you tell me. Who are you?
You mean you're not sure yet?
No.
Well, I guess you just have to decide for yourself.
There are some people who would take exception at the fact that Sally Field mixes business with pleasure there, and other people are undoubtedly going to say, in fact, I think I'm seated across from somebody who's about to say that Absence of Malice does not present an accurate portrait of responsible investigative reporting. And they are right. It is a portrait of irresponsible investigative reporting. And let's face it, some of that does go on. By standing up for a private citizen's right not to be slandered, Absence of Malice looks at the dark side of flat-out, no-holds-barred investigative reporting. It's an intelligent film. It's literate. It contains a Sally Field performance that's quite different from anything she's done before. And I also really enjoyed the subtlety of the Paul Newman character. It turns out to be a lot more complicated than he seems.
Well, I'm really caught here because I admit that the film does have some dramatic appeal. We do want to follow the fate of the Paul Newman character. My faulting of the film is the following. As a movie, not as journalism, but as a movie, it builds too strong a case against Sally Field to the point that I was laughing at her. She commits the journalistic sin that you talked about at the beginning, the slander. She'd be pulled off the story immediately. Instead, she goes on to make another gaffe, a huge gaffe, a fatal gaffe for somebody. She then starts sleeping with Newman. Now, you don't need all of this in the same picture. In other words, I think if they had played it a little softer on her, it would have been a much more effective indictment of journalism.
Don't you think, though, that for the average moviegoer, and of course you and I both have the handicap of knowing a lot more about how a newspaper might cover this story than the average moviegoer can be expected to know.
I agree with you.
Well, wouldn't they enjoy this additional drama as part of the entertainment?
No, I think that it's just too much. It's just too much. They build too much.
Well, what about the performances, though?
Well,
the relationship between Newman and Field is interesting. It's adult, it's complicated, it's fun.
But it wouldn't happen like this. There should be flags going off. And I would say one other thing, that Field is sort of adult. Her character is not very impressive as a woman reporter. I mean, I think it's sort of insulting. But there is the drama to Newman, and it probably accrues to him. He carries us through the picture.
Well, I enjoyed it.
Okay, our next film, Buddy Buddy, is something I thought I would never see. In fact, I'm not sure I actually saw it. A would-be comedy directed by the great Billy Wilder, starring Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. Great talents all. And what? It does not contain a single laugh. Maybe one. This film is bad, excruciatingly bad. Buddy Buddy tells the story of a morose mob hitman, Matthau, trying to make one last hit before he retires. Now, you might think he'd be a lovable old hitman as only Walter Matthau could play him, but no, he's just a rotten, mean old jerk. Anyway, he runs into Jack Lemmon, who is trying to kill himself. Why? Because of a bad second marriage, as Lemmon explains in this typically unfunny scene.
Love, you did it for a dame.
Celia's not a dame, she's my wife. Actually, she's my second wife. I left my first wife for Celia. I gave up everything. The 3 kids, the house, and the insurance. I owned a piece of the rock. And the 2 cars, and the Betamax, and... Now Celia's left me.
That's tough.
For some phony doctor. I think a Dr. Zuckerbrote. He runs this fancy clinic.
Institute for Sexual Fulfillment.
That's a racket. That's what that is. She came up here to investigate it.
Where's she, with the FBI?
No, she's with CBS. You know, the research department. You know 60 Minutes? They were going to expose the whole setup. Next thing I know, she's not coming home. She falls for that quack. She walks out on me, walks out on a job. I get a nervous breakdown and ulcers. The whole thing is in my suicide note. You want to read it?
No.
I could drown myself, but he turned off the water.
Listen, you give me any more trouble and I'm gonna strangle you with my bare hands.
That's another solution.
You're making it very difficult for me to like you.
Now, here's a question for everybody to ponder. Did Matthau and Lemmon think that was funny while they were doing it?
It's amazing.
Amazing. The clip we just saw lasted about 80 seconds. The movie lasts about 90 minutes. And because the whole movie is really like that scene, that means it's about 70 times as awful as the scene you just saw. I was continually staggered by the appalling lack of humor in this film. We are, after all, talking about 2 of the funniest men in the history of movies, and you can add Billy Wilder, too. You want proof? Here, try this scene where Lemmon asks Matthau to make a call to Lemmon's estranged wife.
Now what is it?
I had an idea.
Yes?
Why don't you call her?
Call who?
My wife, and tell her that I tried to kill myself. Here's the number.
I don't even know your wife.
Well, tell her you're a friend of mine.
I'm nobody's friend.
Tell her that my life is hanging by a thread and that I'm slipping fast, and then she'll have to come.
Look, I don't seem to be getting through to you. I'm a very busy man, so don't bug me, don't hassle me. Get off my back.
You mean you're not going to call?
No.
Okay, the deal is off.
What deal?
You don't call her, I'm gonna do it again.
Oh, you
and
are?
again and again. I got razor blades. I got sleeping pills.
You got a handkerchief.
A handkerchief? Yeah. What are you gonna do with that?
He's going to chloroform him. There is no real point to this movie other than endless scenes of Matthau and Lemmon doing unfunny bits of business. They often seem to be totally unaware of each other in the same scene, not even in the same movie they are. This comedy is totally out of sync. The final scene in this film, an epilogue, is hugely embarrassing, sexist, and racist. As for director Billy Wilder, with Buddy Buddy, he now has achieved a real double, and a weird one in movie making. He has made, in my opinion, the funniest sound movie of all time, Some Like It Hot, just a wonderful picture, and now I'm afraid he's made maybe the unfunniest picture in sound movie history, Buddy Buddy.
Gene, I sat there in the theater appalled. Apart from the fact that Lemon and Mathau are funny, and they're not funny in this movie, they are also hugely likable. Even when they're playing straight dramatic roles in serious movies, you like them. You feel a warmth and an affection and ebullience and outgoing quality.
Not here.
In this film, it's dead. They don't seem to be on the screen with each other, as you mentioned. It's really, you say, what is the point of this line of dialogue? How does it lead into the next line? What's this scene for? What's this character for? Why is this funny? Why is it repeated 16 times when it wasn't funny the first time? It's an awful movie. It's really a disappointment coming from these people.
It's a mystery. I don't understand it. The classic example of bad talent, of great talent going bad, is Mike Nichols, Jack Nicholson, and Warren Beatty in The Fortune. This ranks right with that picture.
Well, it's a real disappointment. Let's look at a better picture. Let's look at a new Brazilian film that's one of this year's frontrunners for an Oscar nomination as Best Foreign Picture. The movie is called Pixote. Now, that's spelled P-I-X-O-T-E, and down state Illinois, where I come from, we probably would have pronounced it Pixote. That's also the name of the small boy whose story is told in this film. Pixote is a homeless, orphan street urchin, one of hundreds of thousands of street kids in Brazil, so we're told at the beginning of the film. He's part of a pack of delinquent kids who roam the streets of Rio and Sao Paulo, and in this scene, Pixote and some of his friends have been caught in a police dragnet.
Vamos todos vocês, vai em frente, vai. Vamos em frente. Vai todos em frente, vai. Vamos lá,
Aí, pessoal, o que que houve?
Os homens estão louquinhos, estão pegando todo mundo.
Mataram um coroa e estão querendo pôr no rabo da gente.
Pedro Sócrates, pai Júlio, mãe Ambrósia, 15 anos, Vila Tucumã, confere.
Tá livre.
Diego Emanuel, 13 anos, Marcolina dos Anjos, pai desconhecido, Parque Água Branca, sem número, confere.
Confere.
João Henrique, 10 anos, Rua Lava Pés, 35 Fundos, Maria Ribeiro da Costa, pai desconhecido, confere.
Meu pai morreu.
Pai desconhecido, confere.
Confere.
Pixote and his friends are sent to reform school, but escape and return to the streets of the big city, surviving the only way they know how.
Pega ladrão! Pega ladrão!
Socorro!
A porqueira tá chorando. Olha todos os bichos eu tenho. A coletora tá chorando. Eu tenho 69, o número da felicidade. Ah, eu tenho, diretamente de 40.
Pixote is the smaller of those kids, the one with the cap on, and he is not a professional actor like most of the kids in this film. He is a real Brazilian street kid who was cast and plays more or less himself in the film. And it's heartbreaking the way these kids look and act tough, and they seem hardened and cynical, and yet they're still little boys inside. Here's one of the movie's most touching scenes. Pixote and some of his friends sit on the beach and talk about what they're going to do when they get rich.
Quando eu tiver com a minha grana no bolso, quero ver aquela filha da puta que vai querer me bater. Eu não vou morrer igual o garotão, não.
Para de contar vantagem, Pixote. Você nunca sabe o que vai acontecer.
Agora eu, quando pegar meu tutu na mão, Lilica, vou comprar um 3/8, preto, novinho. Sabe o que fazer isso? É certo, filho da puta! Levando a me respeitar. Chico, rei no gatilho. Mas o primeiro que eu vou matar, eu sei bem quem é. Aquele tira, filho da puta. Que me bateu na delegacia. Me bateu pra caramba. E o pior de tudo é que eu nem sabia porque ele tava me batendo. Mas o dia dele vai chegar, eu sei disso.
There's such an inescapable contrast there between the luxury high-rises in the background and the ambitions of these kids who really have almost nothing except each other, and that's all they have to depend on is each other. Pixote paints a horrifying portrait of the lives of those street children in images that are not sensational or tear-jerking or indignant, but that just simply flatly say, this is the way life is for these kids. It reminded me of some of the Italian neo-realist classics of the late 1940s, like Bicycle Thief or Shoeshine. Everyday portraits of everyday people and the terrible things that poverty can do to them. Pixote is like all foreign films. It's hard to find unless you live in a big city or near a good film society or a campus film program. But if you are able to see this film, I doubt you'll forget it.
I think it's very good, too, and we've always described the reason why some of these films seem so good that look like this. They're not movies that were made by a Hollywood studio trying to peg it to an audience. The person who made this film obviously had a story they wanted to tell. They wanted to reveal a private world and make it public, and they do it beautifully. Films like this are always made with a great deal of passion, and I think you're absolutely right to point your finger on the neutral way this is presented, with one exception, and the one part of the film I don't like is the end when I think they go overboard and get very theatrical.
They have kind of a Madonna and a child sort of
with
image.
a prostitute at the end, and it's wrong.
It's almost as if they wanted to bring the whole film together at the end in one image, and it wasn't quite the right image, but for the rest of the film, it's not all melodramatic, and it's not a lot of plotting, it's just everyday life, and the most horrible things that these kids have to endure, the people they associate with, the things that happen to them, the crime and degradation that they see all around them, and yet there's a kind of an innocence that shines through. They're ambitious, they want to succeed, but they have no values and they don't really have any chance.
Totally aimless. It's an impressive film, except for that last scene. Okay, I've already said that our next film, Ragtime, is one of the year's finest film, and here's why. I can't think of a recent movie that contains as many great performances while at the same time succeeds in telling a big, sweeping story. Ragtime is a panoramic look at the United States just after the turn of the century. The film is based, of course, on E.L. Doctorow's award-winning 1975 novel, and director Milos Forman, in adapting the book for the movie, focuses on one of the many stories in the book, the story of Coalhouse Walker, a proud black man, a jazz musician who has run out on his child and his girlfriend. But in this scene, he visits both the baby and the mother in the home where she's working as domestic help for a wealthy New York family.
Excuse me, but I don't believe anyone invited you in.
This is my child.
This is a cute little devil, isn't it?
Where's Sarah? She doesn't want to see you.
Sarah, just say hello to him. Nothing can happen to you. You're safe here. There can't be any harm in just talking to him.
Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is.
I can marry Sarah. And I will. Soon as she'll have me. I couldn't before, and now I can.
A sweet moment. Now, what happens to Coalhouse Walker is that he becomes involved in a tragic incident. He buys a new Model T car, and when it stalls in front of a fire station, the fire chief and his men, outraged that a black man owned such a luxury, throw horse manure all over the car. Coalhouse demands that the car be cleaned, but the fire chief, Kenneth McMillan, repeatedly refuses. And then something inside Coalhouse Walker snaps, and he and his friends become terrorists, blowing up firehouses around New York State. The situation reaches crisis proportions when Coalhouse's gang takes over a New York library filled with priceless art objects, and it is then that the police commissioner gets into the act. The commissioner is played by James Cagney, his first film in 20 years, and he's fabulous, telling the fire chief, Kenneth McMillan, he had better give in to Coalhouse's demands for an apology and a clean car.
All right, come on. All right, come on, straighten up, Willie.
Are you ready, Mr. Conklin?
Ready? Ready for what? What do you mean?
You know that someone's been asking for you, don't you?
What is this? It's
joke, huh? It's a joke, right?
No joke, Willie. The library over there is worth millions.
So?
And people keep telling me you're a worthless piece of slime.
Holden, you can't talk to me like that!
Shut up,
Oh, yeah.
Willie. You're going to help us now. You're going to talk to that troublemaker, and I mean talk hard like you never talked before. Because he wants you, Willie. And if you can't make him change his demands, he's going to get you.
I don't have to do this. I want a lawyer.
Waldo, library, please.
I got my rights, you know.
Walker? Speaking. We have the fire chief for you.
Send him over.
Take it.
Release him. What do you say we just talk this thing over like? Yeah, I'm ready to do that. I'll go halfway with you on this thing. I don't mind. Sort of like you come on over, we'll sit down and have a nice talk, huh? What do you say? It was a joke, damn you! Can't you even take a joke? You can't talk to them. No! You're gonna take me over there. I'm a newspaper, I'm a lawyer!
My colleague here across the aisle tells me that audiences are applauding Cagney's every scene in this movie, and well, they should, because he genuinely gives a great performance. He's not just a cute old man they're applauding. In fact, the casting of Cagney in this film is a real masterstroke by director Milos Forman. More than any other American actor, Cagney embodies the positive values of this country, and he sends off patriotic sparklers with his every gesture. And that's important, because identifying the nature of the American spirit is very much the point of this film. Ragtime, I think, is the greatest cross-section of America since Robert Altman's landmark film, Nashville. But like the era it represents, this film, Ragtime, is much less cynical and more upbeat. I think Ragtime is just wonderful. So far, it's my favorite of all the Christmas movies.
Can you think, now Milos Forman is from Czechoslovakia.
Right.
Can you think of an American director who has made 4 movies that are more American and more perceptive about America than Taking Off, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Hair, and this film? This man has come to our country, he has looked at us, he has somehow gotten the way we feel, the way we look, the way we sound, the way we live.
And the way we respond to authority. That runs through all of his films. This response to authority, the independent spirit. He loves the free spirit. And I think that this film is much more complex than it's being credited. I don't think there's any thing wrong with saying that a lot of critics in New York in particular have been knocking this film because it isn't as good as the book or as complex as the book.
Or it's not like the book, or it takes a different part of the book than they would have taken. I think the Coalhouse Walker story is the central part of the book, and it should be the central part of the movie.
I think the other issue is the book's the book, and this movie, as I see it, is brilliant.
It's a wonderful piece of ensemble work, not only by the actors, who, as you mentioned, are all good, and
Mary, let's start naming a couple. Mary Steenburgen. Who else?
Howard Rollins.
He plays Coalhouse Walker. These characters have great depth. They may not be on the screen, some of them, for a long time, but the depth is there in the portrayal and in the writing.
The whole film, complex as it is all of a piece. It works from beginning to end. It was as far as I was concerned, I was in the hands of somebody who was tremendously confident of what he wanted to do.
Well, now here's Sparky the Wonder Dog sniffing out the dogs of the week, the week's worst movies.
Well, my dog this week is a Kung Fu extravaganza named the 7 Grand Masters, and I thought maybe with the World Chess Championship just being over, why, this would show Kung Fu champions breaking chessboards with their bare hands, but no. The only pawns in this movie are in the audience.
Getting rooked.
Right. The film follows the adventures of a would-be Kung Fu Grandmaster who vows to challenge and defeat the 7 reigning Grandmasters, including, now let's see, you have the Tiger Grandmaster, the Python Grandmaster, the Eagle Grandmaster, the Rat Grandmaster, and so forth. The hero and his gung-ho groupies march from one showdown to the next, reducing each Grandmaster to a bloody, quivering hulk in the dust, and then always politely thanking them afterwards. Occasionally, everybody stops for dinner, and the groupies sit around eating chicken heads, while meanwhile, the new Grandmaster says things like, "Tomorrow I must fight again." Well, you'd fight too if you got the drumstick.
Very good. Well, I've got something special for my dog of the week, a dog that isn't a dog. Let me explain. It's going to take a while. People ask me a lot, how do you and Roger find all these dogs of the week? Well, a lot of them find us in the course of our reviewing virtually every new commercial film that's in town. But if we haven't seen a dog all week and it's kind of getting close to time to do this show, we will both look through our local newspaper movie ads and go see a film that sounds like it might be a dog. Well, this week I went to a film called Adios Amigo, a Western that was being billed as starring Richard Pryor. And I must admit, although it isn't my policy to prejudge a movie, I will admit that, yes, I had a feeling Adios Amigo just might be a dog. I didn't think Richard Pryor had made a new film by that title, certainly not a Western, which is what Adios Amigo turned out to be. And so my dog-sniffing instincts told me, go see that movie. Well, Adios Amigo is not a new Richard Pryor movie. In fact, it's an old movie, written, produced, directed, and co-starring Fred Williamson, along with Pryor. But this is important. It's not a dog. Pryor is hilarious in scene after scene. You can see him early in his career, even though some of the filmmaking is pretty amateurish. So, I don't have a dog this week, just a shaggy dog story of my search for one.
So it has a happy ending.
And at least we're being honest. We're not going to force a dog into the show if there isn't one.
Very big of you, Gene.
Thank you.
So much for the dogs this week. Now let's take another look at the major movies on this program. Absence of Malice stars Sally Field as a newspaper reporter, and Paul Newman as the man she slanders and loves. I thought it was well acted, entertaining. I vote yes. Gene gives it a reluctant no vote. He felt it was entertaining, but he faults the Sally Field character as wildly overwritten. 2 no votes, though, for Buddy Buddy, Billy Wilder's very disappointing comedy starring Walter Matthau and Jack Lemmon, 2 comic legends wasted in a comedy without laughs. 2 strong yes votes for Pixote, the new Brazilian drama about the life and criminal education of a street urchin. This film is not for children, but it is strong, dramatic, unforgiving, and unforgettable. And finally, 2 very strong yes votes for Ragtime, Milos Forman's ambitious portrait of American life in the first decade of this century. Among the movie's many delights is a great supporting performance by the legendary James Cagney.
I think the message of this show is rather obvious, and that is Ragtime.
Ragtime. You know, when I heard that Jimmy Cagney was coming out of retirement after 20 years, frankly, I expected, you know, just a small, he'd be on the screen for 30 seconds or 45 seconds. It's a real role. It's got a lot of meat to it, and it's a really fine performance by Cagney. He still has the old magic.
Well, he's great, and the movie's great, too. Well, that's all for this week. Join us next time on Sneak Previews when Roger and I will take a look at Neighbors, starring John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, Sharky's Machine, starring Burt Reynolds as an undercover cop, and Pennies from Heaven, the new musical extravaganza with Steve Martin and Bernadette Peters. Until next time, we'll see you at the movies.
Funding for Sneak Previews was provided by this station and by other public television stations.